And I will call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Ed. Again, we don't need to take attendance. We're all still here. It's got the confirmation. Thank you. The official nod. Nod. All right, we have a guest this evening from Ed Advance, Mr. Jeff Kitching. Do you want to introduce him?
Sure. We want to thank Jeff for coming out tonight. He has been a fantastic partner of our region and also in getting us to connect with other surrounding towns, finding opportunities to find some cost efficiencies when we group together and making certain that we have a little bit of a purchasing in larger amounts when we have such small amounts. So I know we've come to him when we had questions on regionalization. We've come to him with many of our questions. So at this time, I welcome Jeff Kitchen.
Thank you so much, Megan, and thank you to the board for giving me a few minutes tonight. I will be brief. I'll talk relatively quickly. I want to share some information about our agency. My name is Jeff Kitching. I've been at Ed Advance for almost 3 years now. I'm a former superintendent. I would tell you that I miss budget time as a superintendent, but I'd be lying to all of you, but I have enjoyed the conversation this evening. It brings me back a little bit. Ed Advance has over a 50-year history, formerly as Education Connection, as Rescue before that. We changed our name to Ed Advance about 3 years ago, right after I got to the agency, but we were created in 1966 by state statutes to do exactly what Megan just described, to help school districts in Connecticut work regionally and find more cost-effective, efficient ways to do business. We are one of 6 RESCs in Connecticut. The largest is in the Hartford area, CREC. Everybody seems to know CREC. ACE is in the New Haven area. And Ed Advance, we cover basically all of Litchfield County and parts of northern Fairfield County. We represent 29 different communities, or 29 different school districts, in 32 different communities in the region because of some of the regional school districts, but I work with 29 separate superintendents. We are governed by a board of directors that's made up of local Board of Education members. We've been fortunate enough to have Michelle Gore serve on our board of directors since I've been at Ed Advance as the executive director. Currently have about 14 districts that actually send us board of directors members. Not everyone shows up to every meeting, but we are fortunate to have a solid core of 8 or 9 board of directors members who show up regularly. We're working hard to try to expand that. I would love to have a representative on our board from every one of the school districts that we represent in the region and continue to work with superintendents on that. We do a lot at Ed Advance. Usually I hear from people, oh yeah, I see your vans, because now we've got the nice bright stickers on our vans. We have almost 200 vans that crisscross the region every day driving students to school. But we do a lot of other things too, and the way I usually put it to people is anything school districts might need, we do. If you need it in the course of operation in your school district, there's a pretty good chance that we provide it or provide it in some way. We are the primary adult education provider for the entire region, Foothills Adult Ed, if you're familiar with that. That's our program. That's an Ed Advance program. That Foothills enrichment brochure goes out to, I'm told, about 85,000 households in the region. We do summer school, we do driver's ed programs, we do all the fingerprinting for the region, do a lot of grant writing. We do food service for close to, I think we're up to 8 school districts in our region right now. Food service is a tough one for us, as you know, as a Board of Education. It's not easy to even break even with food service, but we do it for a lot of smaller districts because if we didn't do it, the Sodexos and the Chartwells of the world aren't lining up to provide food service for smaller districts. So, and more in the last 2 or 3 years, we've provided a lot of special education services. So I'm going to go on to the back page of that first handout that I gave you. It has a couple bar graphs on there. We're proud of the fact that only 53% of our revenue right now comes from school districts, from the fee-for-service programs that we provide. That number 3 years ago was about 35%. We were much more dependent on state contracts, grants, federal grants. And what the growth in that number tells me anyways is that we're doing more things that school districts need, and we're doing them more cost effectively. Because if we can't provide it for a district for less than and at a higher quality than a private provider, then we're not doing our job, and that number wouldn't be going up. So we've been working hard to kind of flip-flop those numbers and rely less on grants and state contracts. The bottom chart shows that almost 90%, and I'm happy to report that number is actually over 90% now, of the revenue we take in is spent back in the communities and the school districts we work for. So for next year's budget, we will have an overhead of under 10% for a nonprofit our size. That's a really good number and a really good indication that we are doing what we need to do and put the revenue back into programs and services for our school districts. Along with the other 5 RESCs, there is no state line item and no state budget line item for regional education service centers like ours. The only state money we get is when the state needs to provide a service and they don't have the capacity to do it themselves. They will contract with RESCs to do some of that work. That's our state money. It's not a standard line item, taxpayer line item. We are the second largest nonprofit employer in Litchfield County. We cut anywhere between about 700 and 900 paychecks seasonally for within our organization, and those employees service over 46,000 students. And we have, as I just mentioned, in the last 2 or 3 years, reinvested a considerable amount of capital for property and for personnel to provide more special education services for the region. That was something that when I came to Ed Advanced 3 years ago, made my way around to meet with superintendents in the region and meet with special ed directors. That was by far the largest need that I heard about, that districts needed more options for students with special needs. Moving on to my little landscape picture, handout here, gives you an idea of what we're all about. Our mission, quite simply, is to help school districts succeed, to work collaboratively with school districts, to provide those educational and related service, and to do it with the quality and an excellence that they should expect. I spend a lot of time with the administration in our agency going over and over again about our focus and our vision to redefine what a regional education service center can be. We are uniquely different than the other 5 RESCs. I spent my whole career as a teacher and administrator and a superintendent in the Hartford area and working with CREC. We don't run magnet schools, and all 5 of the other RESCs run magnet schools, and it does create a different relationship between your agency as a regional service center and your competition as a CREC or an ACES magnet school district. In those other RESC areas, you compete with the RESC for administrative talent, teaching talent, for students. We don't have that same barrier and that same conflict with our partners and the districts in our region. So I do feel we can redefine what a regional education service center can be. I ask my administration all the time that if it's not us providing the service, why aren't we doing it? And if it's not us, who's doing it if we're not doing it? And we truly believe in what we call the 3 C's, that we have changed the culture in our agency significantly to be sure that everybody understands we can't operate as 14 separate departments. We need to follow what I refer to as in what I believe in as systemness, and we'll be stronger and more effective if we all work together and we understand what goes on in all the departments across our agency. I insist on staying connected with the districts. We monitor and track the number of emails that go out to every district and come back from every district, phone calls to our stakeholders. We look at that as a leadership group every month to make sure that there aren't school districts that we have under-connected with and underrepresented. And we need to be ready to customize. We cannot provide one-size-fits-all for the school districts in our region. They're too different. What Region 12 might need is completely different than what Danbury might need or what Torrington would need or what Colebrook would need up north. So we can't provide a one-size-fits-all solution. There's information on the back of this sheet about the Regional Education Service Centers and about the 6 RESCs and the RESC Alliance as a whole. I included our legislative agenda because I know I have been down to talk about the regionalism and regionalization discussions in Hartford. I've spent way more time in Hartford this legislative session than I ever would have wanted to or hoped to. And you know, I've said all along, my concern with those discussions is that it's kind of the shiny object that, you know, some of these really dramatic, what I would refer to as consolidation initiatives that they're talking about. And while everybody's concerned that that might happen, a lot of other things are going on, like teacher retirement contributions and additions to your curriculum that you may not need, and classroom management bills and things like that. So, you know, I'm really proud of the work that the RESC Alliance has done to try to remind legislators constantly that if you really want to focus on cost efficiencies and cost effectiveness for school districts and working together regionally, you need to let the RESCs do that work with school districts and let good ideas grow organically from the regions, and they have been. Megan participates in a group of superintendents in the Western Connecticut area that have done some really good things, and we've been proud to partner with that group to look at special education transportation costs, at purchasing of technology. Had a long meeting today about the possibility of developing a regional education service center here, special education service center in this area. We are in our agency in the process of trying to purchase a school in Plymouth to provide elementary behavioral programming for kids on the autism spectrum and for kids just struggling in classrooms in elementary schools. So those kinds of ideas, when they develop organically and they come from school districts and reflect the real needs of school districts, have a chance of working, sustaining, and benefiting school districts. Forced consolidation isn't going to help anybody. So we're proud of the work the Alliance is doing in that area, and I truly appreciate sometime I told you I was going to talk fast and try to. I know you have a lot to do, but I'd be happy to answer any questions about the agency or RESCs in general.
Yes. Since you spent so much time at the legislature, what is your prediction or projection as far as the possibility that the towns or the school districts will pay toward the teacher pension?
I haven't spent as much time in those discussions, but my understanding is, as someone mentioned before, the governor has dialed way back on that. And I don't hear school districts, as worried about it as they were. So I do think there would be such a dramatic burden to most districts and most towns, especially the non-urban towns, that I think the governor finally realized that. And my understanding is it's dialed back. The conversations I've been involved in have been far more around the regionalization legislation that's been put forward.
Yeah.
It depends on who you talk to. I think there are a couple people that seriously think it's a good idea. I don't know if they've grown up in Connecticut and have been in Connecticut their whole life and understand that, we're the land of steady habits, and I just don't see us moving forward with any kind of speed, or with at least the two big initiatives, let's redistrict around the probate court map. I don't think that's going to happen. And let's take every district that has fewer than 2,000 students and force them to find a neighbor to consolidate with. I was up in Hartford on Friday to testify and explained that, in the northwest corner, you'd have to go to 15 or 20 towns up there to get enough so that you're over that 2,000 limit. If Region 1 and Region 7 combined tomorrow, they still wouldn't get up to 2,000 students. If Wamogo and Litchfield combined, they don't have 2,000 students. So, some of these things are just, and the other thing that I've said over and over again, I haven't heard any discussion about where the savings is going to come from in doing this. You all know as board members, the expense of educating students is really is primarily based on the number of students you have. The number of students we have is going to be the same. Now, yes, there's some economy of scale that happens, but I don't know, where the state savings is in all of this. So.
Where they incorporate all of the schools, primary, secondary, high school, all into one campus, and then plus the students here for those campuses, which is, I presume, would be the only way you could do it in the state, you have to create a campus or something, so all the towns, in a certain area, plus their students in, and
Yeah, I mean, there are many areas of the country where a 45-minute to an hour-long bus ride is the norm. It's not Connecticut. I realize, Florida has, I think, 32 or 36 school districts, and we have 170 almost. So but, I mean, for a lot of small towns, and I hear this from many of the small towns in our region, their one school is their community, and they worry about losing their sense of community if they lose their school.
I just wanted to point out that in Region 12, 45 minutes to an hour is the norm.
Yeah.
So we don't want to go beyond that anymore. And that's, I think, is the main impediment to a lot of this, is even if you were to combine 3 districts to make it in this area over 2,000 finally, you'd end up with kids who had to travel to one of those schools or to build a whole new school in between 3 different districts, an hour and a half or more. And that begins to defeat the purpose of So I'm glad that information is trickling upstream to the legislature a little bit.
Any other questions? Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Michelle?
I just wanted to thank Jeff for coming out and to let everyone know that the board meetings at Advance are incredibly informative. I learn something new every time I go, and they're always working really hard to listen to what the districts need and find creative ways to accommodate that. So I just want to thank you
you.
for your leadership, because I think you've done a fantastic job.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Go ahead, ma'am.
And I'll put in a plug, and I think I speak on behalf of Nicole as well, being newbies, and to know we've been able to reach out to Ed Advance and getting some guidance and support. So I know Rich Carmelik has been fantastic in helping us along too. So thank you.
It's our pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Come back.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Good luck with your budget.
All right. Moving on to item number 3, public comment. Seeing no one, we'll move on to item number 4, the consent agenda. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, the items on the consent agenda pass. Item number 4, we'll move to the board's chair, the chair's report. I had a couple of things to say. We've actually talked about them through the discussions earlier, so I'm going to yield my time to Megan.
All right, good. I've got a lot to say. No, so just some updates that we have had. We want to congratulate our Invention Convention winners. We had that at each one of our elementary schools. So Washington Primary School, we have Lexi Thomas and Isaac Fitch, who are going to states. For Booth Free, we have Isla Beckstrom going to states, and at Burnham, we have Lily Bilak. So we're very proud of our young inventors, and I think we've had a lot of conversation because we get them interested in science early on, and how do we continue that trajectory up and make certain we continue to have intellectually curious students. So that's something we're going to continue to talk about as they go into Chapag. On March 20th, there was the Cabe on the Hill, and Michelle Gora and Tara Flaherty took a group of students to meet our legislators. Our students asked some tough questions regarding regionalization and found out there were some realizations about regionalization. So, Michelle, did you want to say anything?
I just wanted to say it was a great day. You know, some years are a little more productive than others, but we actually got to meet with a Eric Berthel, who is our state senator, who's also on the education committee, a ranking member of the education committee. And our students did a fabulous job of representing the small district. And they pointed out the same thing that you pointed out, Alan, about with the bus rides, and had good questions. They asked, well, we're already a region, so would this apply to us? And he said, I don't really know. So it was great. It was good to see them participate. We got to watch part of a committee hearing, and they were just fascinated by the question and answer process and the deliberations happening. So we got to kind of see it in action. We got updates from the education committee. So it was a really productive day, and we had a really great group of students. So
Excellent.
yeah.
First-hand account. Thank you. As you recall, Rich Iniamo, our SRO, had presented about the future of the DARE program. The DARE program has evolved to the Spartan program, and that stands for Safety, Positivity, and Reinforcing Thoughts Against Narcotics. They're going to wear that T-shirt when they get to high school. They weren't going to wear the DARE T-shirt, but they will wear that Spartan T-shirt. So wonderful connection. But this is an approach that preserves the core components of DARE, which is the drug abuse resistance education, and also focusing on some of the new trends and challenges specific to the Region 12 youth. Also, the difference is that in this program, we will have, instead of having the 10 programs for our fifth graders, we will have 8 programs for our fifth graders. Then they will continue it on to sixth grade, and then they will have small group discussions in seventh and eighth grade. This is a way to track it through the years.
Great.
And I think that to know this is something where we're going to come at it again and again, make it age level specific. What's applicable to our fifth graders is not the same conversation we're going to have with our eighth graders. And so I think that helps them evolve with us. And to know that Rich will be the person carrying that torch throughout, I think only strengthens the continuity of the conversation across the years. We had parent-teacher conferences that occurred on March 21st and 22nd. But I also want to remind our parents that conferences do not have to be at a time that we schedule it. Meaning you can call a parent-teacher conference at any time during the year. Yes, we set established times in order to make certain you're still okay and we still care about your children, and we provide that time. But to say to you, we also want to make certain we are open and responsive at any time for those conferences and conversations. I also want to share that on March 26th and 28th, Kim Gallo, Lori Travato, and I had held our community conversation in Bridgewater and Roxbury, respectively. I appreciated the conversations that came out of it. There was lively discussions in each one of them. And I think really what it came down to is everybody wanted to see, did the predictions come true? How close were we to those models? Each one of the conversations, they usually stopped at that slide to talk about what are the revenues, what's going to happen. But I have to say, and obviously I'm a little biased, but there was excitement about the program in general and the direction it was going in. And to see that there was such a positive influx of our own students in this region who were interested in our Roxbury conversation, we actually had a student from Roxbury who attends Nanawag, who came. She had our FFA jacket on, and we actually ended up having her as our co-presenter because she kept saying, I wish you had this program when I was going through, but I wake up every morning at 5 a.m. and I'm excited. She was talking about what her future was going to be and some opportunities she has. So it really turned into a very nice conversation. So very proud of that. So as far as some field trip notifications that we have, on June 3rd, we have the Burnham School, grades 3 through 5, going to the Bronx Zoo in New York. Additionally, we have our 8th grade going to a Boston trip. They will hit the Museum of Science, the Freedom Trail, Quincy Market, and that will happen on May 13th. And for personnel, we have an appointment of Anne Marie Sarbello will be the library clerk at Washington Primary School. We do have a leave of absence coming up where Hillary from Booth Free is going to be on maternity leave May 13th through the end of the school year. And we have one resignation, Amanda Schreck, who is a paraprofessional at Booth Free, and that was effective March 15th. And that concludes my update.
Thank you. Stephanie, Treasurer's report.
Finance Committee met last week, Wednesday, March 27th, and besides the discussions that we had regarding the bond and band sale results, which we kind of already went over tonight, trying to get back to business as usual, going over the monthly financials, and that format is still kind of changing and morphing a little bit. Nicole's still tinkering and making those reports work for her. So the committee's following along and making our adjustments as well as far as questions and reading the reports. Nicole has come up with a summary page, which I don't think is available to the full board yet, right?
We had that one account we were going to fix in the 900 section.
Right.
Turned out correctly.
That'll stay the same for the remainder of the year, won't it? Or you're able to make those transfers?
Yeah, I'm waiting to hear back from
Oh.
Charlie about how to transfer it properly.
Okay, so I won't
it's done
share
right
that
going
information
forward.
yet. But as far as tracking for the year, we are, again, the percentages sound a little bit different. Where we're at right now would be 7.34%, whereas maybe a year ago, if we were presenting this, it would sound something closer to around 3%. But again, that's, to explain the differences there, we'd have to go line by line. Nicole, again, is truing up and moving information to places where she feels like they should be, or just report more accurately. So again, okay, so I won't go over the 900s, but other than that, yeah, we're revising our meeting schedule. We've been meeting Wednesday mornings. We're now going to meet Thursday mornings, right? So, yeah, other than that, I think we're trying to get back to business as usual.
Jim?
I'm sorry, Stephanie. The 7.3% is what? Is that of the budget is spent, or?
That's what remains. Sorry, am I
Remains.
on? Yeah, that's what the percentage remains. So normally we'd hear that number ticking down. Bob used to report, he used to include pre-encumbrances. We are not including those now, or we're including them in a more, I don't want to say accurate, but as truer to our timing, truer to our timing cycles, I guess. That's a better way to explain it.
Right.
I don't know.
But in terms of the budget projection, everything, Nicole, looks good for green lights down the track for the balance of the year.
Yes.
Our bottom line
We're not
still,
running, we don't see any problems
No.
finishing out the year, right?
We don't see any problems finishing.
So I appreciate the
So-
movement, and it's
yeah,
hard to do a
it's
year-over-year
difficult to explain
compare.
it because the percentages
Yeah.
sound so different than what we're normally accustomed to hearing.
Right.
But the idea is that, yeah, we still have a good percentage remaining for the year. We're on track. The bottom line hasn't changed. It's just in each one of the general ledger items, those numbers
Yeah.
are shifting a little bit.
Yeah. I think we got the message. So I'm looking forward to seeing your version of how you see the budget coming together. I think maybe a few more of us are interested to see what that view looks like. So thanks.
Yeah, inheriting this halfway through the year, things get a little slippery, but next year, I think we'll be more accustomed to hearing the
Well,
way Nicole
yeah.
reports, so.
Yeah.
Sorry if that sounds confusing.
Well, no, I mean, she needs to, it's her show, and she needs to put it together in a way that makes sense for her and Megan. And they are well within their rights to
Yeah,
to
she is,
want
and she's
to want a work product that they're comfortable with
And I'll say
and
that
how they
we've
want to
had
manage.
We've had very productive meetings. Our last meeting was 2 hours, and this was supposed to kind of be back to normal, so.
Right.
We're asking good questions. She's explaining a lot, and anyways, yeah, but
Good.
committee's comfortable with where we're at.
All right, thank you. Committee reports, back to me. I'll just say the Bylaws Committee had a meeting on the 25th. Monday, we are officially done with our work. I want to thank everybody for kind of powering through the list. great job. We'll see if the board continues to agree with the work. We have a, kind of pick it back up tonight with the list of, that we almost got done last time. But, so we have a nice queue behind us. So every meeting, we're going to just keep adding these things until we get them all approved and done and dusted. So, thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
And I think on behalf of the bylaws committee, you did a lot of heavy lifting, Anthony, and we appreciate you got it to a point we could edit it versus really creating from the beginning. And so we know the effort and time that went into it. So thank you for all the pre-work that went into a lot of work.
Thank the Giants and the Jets for providing me with enough boring time to be able to focus. All right, education, Michael.
Sure. We met this evening, and one of the things that we talked about was extending an invitation to our new head of guidance. Maybe this was selfish on my perspective because I have not had a chance to meet him yet. So I thought the entire board might be interested in meeting with him, hearing about some of the things that he's working on with his department and his vision for guidance at Chapag. So hoping to set that up for the near future. We talked quite a bit about new course offerings, and in particular, just wanted to compliment again the administration on highlighting some of the new AP and ECE offerings that we have. I mean, it's really been remarkable within the last few years, the growth that we've seen at that level and challenging our students. It's really inspirational. And not resting on our laurels, looking at other opportunities for possibly other ECE programs, talking even about, in a few years, a new AP offering in an AP Environmental Science, which would flow nicely into our Ag Science program. And that's about it.
Jen.
Michael, I think I talked with you about it before, but I was wondering if at some point we could invite Donna Wright to come speak to the board and present. I'd love just for her to discuss what she's doing in the art department. I mean, she's just everywhere. I also just thoroughly love the AP portfolios on the website, and I just feel like it's a great opportunity for Donna to discuss that and maybe introduce it. I think there are a lot of people who don't know about the AP portfolios, and I selfishly just think that they're so magnificent and worthy of discussion. And like I said, she's doing art shows, and so I just would love to give her some time to prepare, but I think it would be great to have
Sure.
her.
I know that I had given your idea to Teresa, so I'll just gently remind her
And
and
then
see where we stand.
Next year, obviously not this year, but I would love at some point in the first half of the year to have the music program come as well and speak a little bit about what they're doing as well.
Another great idea. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Time.
Chairman?
Sir.
I'd like to move to add to the agenda a very short report from the Labor Negotiations Committee because we have something to report.
All right.
Second.
Second. Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion passes. Greg, floor is yours.
All right, very quickly, as you know, we were in mediation with the union representing our paraprofessionals and office clerical people, and that has resulted in a successful mediation. We now have a proposed contract, and as soon as it makes its way to me, we will put that on the agenda for a meeting coming up.
Thank you. Okay, item number 5, the agri-science updates, that time of the evening.
I'm actually, I think if it's okay, I'll go up there so I can kind of get in the driver's seat a little.
Go right ahead.
All right. All right, we're going to multitask a little bit. So as you can see where we are today, we're getting very close to having us go vertical for our project. Looking at the top, additionally, at this time, I do want to call people's attention to June, because on June 18th, school ends June 17th. We have a board meeting June 17th. we have to end the board meeting by June 18th because June 18th they start abatement here. So it is going to become incredibly important because Chapag campus is closed. We are relocating Mrs. Gallo and the entire crew because it is closed. So I want to make certain that I highlight those things. Timing is becoming incredibly important, down to when furniture is going to be able to be delivered on a closed campus. So that's something that ONG has been coordinating. I know Greg has been on them to make certain that timelines are being met, how things are happening, but it's important that we're watching for that date because when we're going to have our science labs complete, staffing at this point, so some of our major activities. John, to talk to our conversation, at this time we have 49 students who have committed to agri-science, and I will show you the enrollment and how it breaks down in the next slide. Additionally, we observed agri-science teaching candidates, those who made it past our first round, were then tasked to perform a lesson for us as an observation. During this lesson, we had them with our 8th grade students. They had to actually do either it was using ag mechanics, food, having, whatever their expertise was, we wanted to see where they really shone. And so at this point, we are at this point in a holding pattern, and our candidates know that it is a holding pattern pending budget. Additionally, we held our community conversations in each town. We had the bond and band sale that was very favorable. The FF&E that was approved by the building committee, and it will be presented tonight by Jennifer from Castle Booze. But at this point, we want to take that to the state on Wednesday. Other major activities that we've had, AgriScience now has a Facebook page that is being run, not by, in the past we had community advocates that were running their own Facebook pages. Now it's our staff. So Lori Travato has gotten that up and functional. We want to make certain we're proud of what we have. We want to put it out to the world. Additionally, we have now put up on our website the curriculum scope and sequence. So if you go to our AgriScience site, that has now been updated. It's laid out beautifully, so that way if you want to see where we are, if you want to get a real idea of which course it is. Again, this is also one that we recognize is evolving. But it is up there because we want to make certain that people have the ability to be open consumers of their education. We're doing our scheduling with AgriScience students. Michael Boucher has gone out to the schools. We're looking at making certain we're ready, FF&E, and also our union talk to make certain that we have what is the scope of the job responsibilities of our new AgriScience teachers. So they do have to work a longer school year. We do want to make certain that we're taking into account what that looks like for next year. And again, and I can't stress this enough, Chapag will be closed after the last day of school. So, specifically, I'm talking to swimmers. So, but here is where we want to have our adjustments that we've had. This is where I know when we had looked at our model, and I want to make certain we keep coming back to this because originally in our model, we had done 109 students when we were looking at our business model. And that was, as you can see, we held constant versus what are some of the variables, and we took the average. And it was very astutely pointed out to me that it looked like I was potentially having low standards. That's not the way that we want to operate. So what we did is as we moved the model out, we did move it not to just to the 115, and we kept that constant, but it is one. We are still chasing other towns. We're courting. We're trying to make certain that we're not just happy and we're not just going to settle forever with the model of how many students we have today. We're looking to grow and build, and so you'll see that in the model as we talk about it. But I wanted you to see where the numbers came from, that it didn't just come out of thin air. It wasn't something that we, took a dartboard and figured out what number it landed on. We're trying to be very scientific and very precise in how we're delivering to you what we think are our potential numbers. So, as of March 29th, we have 49 students. So our ending Sherman had 4 students. Newtown has 3. If you notice, we have 1 that is no longer coming to our program. 10 for New Milford, 2 for New Fairfield, 7 for Danbury. As you notice, we had 4 when they first committed. We went back into the wait list, and we had 3 very eager, 1, 2, 3, come on down. So at this time, we are at the 7. Brookfield, we are at 4. Again, we are able to go into the wait list. In ours, we have 18, and we do have one other that is a special circumstance, and one for that, so we are at 49. So our freshman cohort is at 43. If you notice, we lost one from Newtown and one from our own students. So that's where we landed with that at 43. And then for our sophomores, we have 6 sophomores. So that, at this time, is our firm number of what we're looking at for our agri-science numbers.
So what do you have from ninth grade in the sending towns? 29?
If we look up there, we have 30 from our sending towns.
30?
Yep, 13 minus 43.
Are you counting the other?
Yes.
The other,
The other.
the other's not from the sending towns, right?
No, it's a special arrangement.
So from the defined sending towns, it's 29.
29 from the defined sending towns. You are correct.
Okay.
And 1 sophomore from our defined sending towns.
Nothing gets past me, Joe.
Okay. All right. And at this time, I know that people had wanted to see our financial model, but I also know that Greg has some pictures he would like to show. So it's a question of, do you want us to continue through and we can have Nicole talk to the financial model, which will throw the agenda out of whack, or do you want to have the pictures first? We can minimize the screen and go in order
Tell you
of
what,
the
why
agenda.
don't we, you want to go with this? Because I was going to get to Jennifer so she can leave. But go ahead.
All right. Apologize.
I can't find any of the
All right. Take it. Okay. Thank you.
all the PDFs in the 318 folder disappeared on for all the bottom. They're gone. I was.
No, you do, 'cause you gotta be able to-
So what we did with what we're calling model version 7, we followed the same Excel spreadsheets that you have seen in the past so that you could compare apples to apples. The summary page is what I'll go over here. If you want to get further into the weeds, I provided all the tabs on the Excel spreadsheet. No, I thought you had a question for me. And what I also did, I'm going to hand out to you, is the version 6 model that was based on 139 students that was passed out previously, the last version that you saw. I took our results from this spreadsheet and mimicked them in the same format so that if you want to compare them column to column, you can do that.
So Nicole, you're going to walk us through the summaries? Is that what we're planning on?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that good?
Uh-huh. I lost that folder too. Jesus Christ. Jeez.
So, do you all have access to this electronically? I can't get it all up on the screen, so.
Okay, I can share with everybody directly from the copy, so I'll do it that way.
Not part of the agri-science.
It was part of the packet. It's in the link that was in the agri-science project.
The agri-science
Yeah, but you can't open it because access is denied.
Yeah, it's weird to get, here's version 7, but
I'm sending it to you right now directly.
title page.
Okay. I just shared it with everyone.
And there they are. Don't do that to me. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm actually going to move to the Compare tab, which is Summary 7 versus Summary 6. These are color-coded if you have them on your computer screen. So basically what's happening between version 7 and version 6 is the lower than expected sophomore class that's entering in year 1 is offsetting revenue projections. And if you go across the 22-year model, the total decrease in revenue between version 7 and version 6 over the 22 years of the program is $700,000. Now that's if you hold revenue constant. We did not inflate the numbers. So we're considering that our revenue in year 22 is going to be identical to our revenue next year, which I modeled it this way because that's how it's always been modeled. I don't believe that revenue won't inflate over 22 years, but to keep it consistent, I thought it was more transparent so that you could compare what you were looking at before to what you're looking at now. So the biggest differences between the two models are highlighted here. And as I just said, so years 1 through 6 are the biggest changes as we ramp up to full enrollment. You'll see that in year 7, as Megan just discussed, we went to 115 students from sending districts. We've also increased our numbers of Region 12 students, which does add state revenue, but we increased it to give access to our students, not necessarily because of that additional revenue.
So, Nicole, would you prefer questions be held, or
No,
how
I
do you want
think
to do this?
you can ask as we go along.
Okay. I have a question.
Sure.
All right. So the 700K is primarily due to the assumption that was in V6 that we were going to have a 10th grade class coincident with our 9th grade class starting this year. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So obviously that's going to have a 3-year hangover, right? Because 10th becomes 11th and 12th, and that's basically 700K.
Right. If you look at years, so year 1 of the program is the current year when we're not taking any students. It's our planning year. Year 2 of the program is year 1 of students. Again, this is how the model has been developed through the years.
Right.
So our biggest deficits are in year 2, 3, and 4 until we make up for the fact that we didn't take a full sophomore class. And after that, revenue is going to stabilize, and it's going to stay stabilized throughout the program.
And we didn't take, just to be clear, we didn't take a full sophomore class because, why? Because the assumption was bad?
I believe the assumption was bad. We took, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Megan, I believe we took all of the applications that we received. The candidates were qualified, but there was also a low number of applications. I think they're...
The reality, we weren't going to take children out of Nanawag. And so we weren't going to give any student a discontinuous high school education. So in saying that we were going to be able to double the amount of sophomores that currently exist at Nanawag, when there's already sophomores at Nanawag, it had some inherent flaws. Additionally, we also recognize that the towns that are ascending towns aren't going to pay what is an additional extra class when we're looking at this. So as we did project higher in our freshman year, but our sophomore year did fall short of what was the original projection. But I do have to say the projection had flaws in the inherent nature of how it was developed.
The assumption was that the 10th grade that's currently at Nanawag was going to essentially move over and transfer to Chippewa. For our sending districts, yes. Right. Correct. Our portion from our sending towns would transfer or leave Nanawag to come in, and that's how we were getting a 10th grade class. And that assumption was not a very good assumption because I'm not sure what that was rooted in. Okay.
So that actually wasn't the assumption. We weren't going to actually take students from Nanawag. We had agreed with Nanawag because then they wouldn't have a sophomore class. Right. So the original thinking was that we would be able to go to their wait list and look at students that didn't originally get in. But what we didn't realize was there wasn't a mechanism for reaching high school students because all of the recruiting happens in middle school in the 8th grade. So there was no way to reach the sophomores that weren't able to get into the agri-science program now that they were at their respective high schools, and there were FERPA issues with getting access to that So that didn't really work the way it was intended.
And I do also think the sending towns weren't going to double their budget for sending them to both Nanawag and Chippewa. So
Correct.
there are things that, when we looked, it was some assumptions that couldn't have been met.
Yeah, the incoming sophomore class was supposed to be smaller because it was a new concept, but we figured we had room, so we would try it, and we were able to accept a few, but it was nothing that had ever been done before, so trying to figure out how to reach them was not, yeah.
And the 115, what's the breakdown between sending towns and Region 12? Or are you going to get there?
The 115 is all sending towns. In year
Oh, I'm sorry, the 115 is
all
all sending towns.
And that 115 is the year that we hit 115, which is in year 7. We
Mhm.
also take 40 students from Region 12, so the total enrollment would be 155.
And how does the 29 compare to V6?
The V6 model had projected 31, 119 total from sending towns.
And so we're projecting lower than the previous model.
From sending towns, yes.
And why is that?
One of the reasons is because of the cap that we didn't expect from New Milford.
Mm-hmm.
And then I believe Danbury also has a cap, but the Danbury cap was accounted for in the V6 model.
Well, the Danbury cap went up. V6 Danbury was capped at 15, and they increased it to 25. So did Milford's cap consume the increase from Danbury? Or I'm still trying to figure out why we're projecting lower than what we had.
Can I get back to your other slide, Megan, that has...
That's what I was going to say.
Is that it?
You want to make it screen?
That's what we looked at, is that, so when we ended up holding it constant versus the variable, so we knew that we could have plus, so this is their average, and we're looking at this. These right now would be their average, so then if we said, okay, probably up to 5 times the 4 years is where we got to the 20, and we took that through. So that's where our numbers came from. So holding constant at the cap of Danbury being 25 and Milford being 20, and Deerfield again stretching to say 10 because we took plus their average. Brookfield, Sherman, Utah.
What's the status of Bethel?
At this time, Bethel did have a conversation last week about entertaining another conversation, and they said that what they'd like to see is once our program is up and running, they have asked me to share videos, information, but next year, once our program is up and running, at that time they will consider a conversation with our board.
So there's still, well, they're not coming next year, that's clear. But there's still a possibility that they can come into the fold.
We're going to continue to pursue relationships with towns around us, yes.
So then
But at this
connecting-
time, I wanted to make certain that I was accounting for what are the consistents. Just like we didn't increase the state tuition for the 20 years, we didn't want to add towns that currently have not committed to us.
So we're saying in the course of 20 years, 29 is as good as it's going to get. I'm looking at the model. So if you switch back to the Excel spreadsheet, you flatlined at 29 after year 7 and basically saying that's it.
What we're saying is we're holding constant, just like we did with the state tuition. Is that ever going to be it? No, that should be right there. That's what we can say is to hold a model. But we should always be looking for additional students. We should always be marketing. We should be looking for more.
I realize that, but there's an inconsistency with the words and the numbers. So we had an approved model that the board approved at 31 from the sending towns.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're suggesting that we take that expectation down by 2.
By 2 students. And increase the amount of students that we have from Region 12.
Well, I understand that part, but
Okay.
we haven't gotten there yet.
Right, and we, knowing that at this time, we also have things that we have to consider.
I
How
just
many
think-
students fit in a lab, whether or not we're gonna add additional staff for those things. That all comes with the evolution of the program and growing it. We're holding constant right now.
Right, well, I'm just going back to the many, many conversations we had about enrollment. We settled on, we're all convinced at the time that 31 is what we were going to get from these sending towns. And we held that number, and now we're saying it's not going to be 31, but I haven't heard a really good reason why not.
New Milford's cap.
Against the Danbury increase, the Milford's cap is not only taking up
Danbury's-
the extra 10 that Danbury gave us, but it's gone beyond it to take 2 down.
Danbury's increase, we found out March 2018. So it should have been in that factor of 22.
It wasn't.
Knowing what's 25.
It wasn't. The 139 was settled in version 5 when the board voted on it over a year, probably plus ago, when Danbury's cap was firmly at 15. When Bob reran the numbers to create version 6, we didn't change or touch the enrollment numbers. We left the enrollment numbers where they were. Bob was just recasting, in fact, reaffirming that nothing has changed in his model from V5 to V6. So I think if you do that compare, you're not going to see any delta between those 2 models, really. So I'm just sitting here thinking, over 20 years, we're saying that we're never going to be able to intercept the plan that it was approved, that was the basis upon which we agreed to move forward on this project, and now we're starting to backpedal off that.
I don't think we're backpedaling, and I think actually when we look at what is the actual revenue of the program over the 22 years, the model we currently have right now is more positive than the one that was ran in June.
But when we get to
2018.
the debt line, if I understood it correctly, Bob's model included the coverage of the lab debt. This takes that debt out. So it's really not an apples to apples.
I think he took that out a couple.
He took that out and then also added some outside contributions that we have.
So the question I asked you earlier, Nicole, during the day, the ag stem, the lab debt was out of V6?
He removed the lab debt from V6. I have the projections that he used.
It's not in there.
It's not.
So, okay. Okay. Michael?
Just a question about the caps. Right now, there are only 2 sending districts that do have a cap with us, correct?
Yes, and one is just proposed. We have to have a conversation with the board at that one.
Okay. So it would be just Danbury and New Milford currently?
Currently, you're correct.
Okay. I'm just wondering, do other ag science programs have similar caps placed on them by various numbers of towns within their
Yes, and we've watched very closely. Right now, one of the schools that is an agri-science school has had some struggles with finding that fine balance between what the sending town was going to send for numbers and making certain they weren't over-enrolling and overburdening another town's budget. And so this is what we work with our towns, and we want to make certain that we're showing we are amicable for working together with the town and being understanding. You know, I'd rather forgo one with one student with the hope of getting an entire town, because they see that not only are we having a superior program, we're a district that's willing to work with them.
the assumption that I have when I hear the word cap is that this is not a hard and fast cap. In other words, there could be a scenario where there are 26 Danbury students who are fully ready for we'd love to accept them. They are ready for our program. We'd love to have them. But from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Danbury under that scenario wouldn't say, sorry, you're only getting 25. Is that correct?
They may. So just what I had done, once we had confirmed what is the amount of students that met our criteria from our list, I reached out to each one of the superintendents to make certain, here's what we're thinking, this is what we have, do you have the budget, is everything good with you? So again, before we sent out and put anybody in a bad situation, we are working with our towns. To say, if I said to them, I've got a very strong case, I did reach out to one of the other superintendents to say, hey, I've got someone who's a contender, would you consider allowing them in? They didn't have a budget for it, but they said, you know what, if anything frees up, we will definitely have that on our list and we can send that student to you. So it is a constant back and forth with the other superintendents to make certain we're working on our numbers as well. And they recognize we're building a program here.
Right, and from what I understand from I know conversations that we've had with superintendents is that superintendents are loath to say, both privately and publicly to families, no, we're not allowing your child to do what they want to do and what they're capable of doing. That's usually doesn't go over very well publicly.
Nope, we've reminded them that.
And so the averages that we're seeing for other towns, let's take Sherman, for example, when you're doing the projections, correct me if I'm wrong, but those are not caps, correct?
Sherman has no caps. No.
So there is an ability for us to recruit more than that historic number if we're doing well.
There absolutely is. And that's what we will strive for. Pete? It's an interesting conversation. I know Michelle and I were actually at a CABE conference when they were talking about the number of students that they have to send and that. So,
what authority do schools have legally over capping the students that come to a program of another school? Is there any legality whatsoever?
there really isn't, other than it looks like they're restricting their students. So there has been the guided practice of whatever your average is. Our agreements with the towns were your average plus some as we build a program. So that's where we were able to work with the towns. But it's
1060
typically, what is the average?
1065 gives them the legal right to cap.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know, right?
Yeah.
That answers my question.
Not the,
It is.
Mm.
They are.
I don't think so. I don't think the absolute cap. I think it's the number of programs they support, right?
It's not settled law.
Yeah.
When did New Milford suddenly cap?
This year they were looking to put some other restrictions on.
But was it after all of the application and acceptance process, or before that? So when they saw the applications and the acceptance, that's when they went, wait a second.
I have to say to you, there were a lot of districts that were surprised how many applicants had come through our program. So I do think it made them sweat a little. At this time, we'll have the conversation with them. But at this point, we're trying to work with our districts.
So to just put it in perspective, the delta here that we're talking about is over the 13-year period, $1.1 million. That would otherwise fall to the bottom line. That could possibly fund other things in Chippewa. So that's kind of what we're walking backwards from. Not kind of, we are. So I'm still over 20 years to say that with a change in emphasis in programs and pathways and just looking for ways to improve the program to attract 2 more kids per entering class is not a lot to go after. And by putting it in this model like this and saying we're basically memorializing the fact that this is a step backwards.
Yeah, no.
Speak up. Come on. I can't be the only one here.
Well, I guess I don't see it. This is new to me. I'm just looking at it for the first time.
Yeah,
now.
well,
So
right.
You've been
and
playing with it, so just give
I
me
have.
a second.
I have the benefit because the board didn't get it in advance.
So But I don't think it's a memorializing, because clearly this is version 7. So I think what it looks like is it's a projection based on what we know at the moment, with the idea that we're going to continually strive to accept more students or work with our towns or improve program or attract other talent, but given what we know at the moment, this is kind of what it looks like. I mean, it's always a moving target. The state is talking about, contributing more towards the tuition. When we actually asked Senator Berthel about that, and he said that, I mean, it's not happening at the moment, but there is support for it. There's just not financing for it at the moment. So over the years, that could change, and that could change the cap. So there's lots of moving parts. It's the state, it's the towns. There's a lot. So I don't think it's memorializing it. It's just saying, if we took what we have at the moment and we ran it out 20 years, this is what it would look like. It doesn't mean we're not ever going to change it.
So when we looked at V5 and we all voted to spend $40 million, what were we thinking then? Could be this or could be that. I think we all felt pretty confident that was it. And we knew that it was going to take some work to deliver it. And we made a commitment, and now we're just saying, well, we got 1 year under the belt and we're already going, well, it's a little harder than I thought.
I don't
and
think
we're
so.
stepping back.
You think that's what this says?
That's not
Yeah.
what I'm hearing.
I do.
I don't think that's what this says. I don't think that's what it says at all, actually.
For me personally, whether we're saying 29, we could very well say more than 29. So to put it in a box and be frustrated publicly about it when it could really still go either way, I think is unfair, personally. And I don't think we necessarily need to make this seem like a failure, because that's what I'm hearing. That's just what I'm hearing. So I think that we really just moving forward, I don't hear complacency. I don't hear that we're just going, oh, okay, this is what it's going to be. I think that's what it is for today. And I think we're going to move forward.
The other question I had on the Region 12 students, we have them in 10 students per year, right?
Correct.
And we think that's sustainable too over 20 years?
I think if we deliver a strong program, I think it is. I think if we water it down and become something that is not, I think the enthusiasm can wane. But if it continues to be, and I think that's where the beauty of what's been designed is it is actually not separate in part of the high school. Everybody is constantly walking through that as part of their educational experience.
I think it's overstated over 20 years as the district declines, but that's just my opinion. We had it at 4, which even if you doubled it to 8, but still. All right, nobody else has any questions, so just keep going.
Hold on a second. I'm having trouble trying to figure out the numbers. So we're no, I have them kind of in all these different places, but I think that the dissonance for me is that we have a less enrollment between greater enrollment between 6 and 7. Yet we're committing to a smaller number between 6 and 7. And so I'm trying to do the math based on what we just talked about, and it's not working out. So we have 49 enrolled this year, for next year, right?
Right.
But we're not projecting 49 every year.
That's, Alan, that includes 10th grades.
Oh, that includes 10th grade. Oh,
That's why
boy.
it's not
Sorry.
working out.
All right, I'm sorry. So there's 6 in 10th grade?
There's 6 in 10th grade, so we have
Okay,
43 in 9th.
43. So 43 times 4 is 172 enrolled. So when we have in Model 7 155, how are we basing these calculations on 155 if actually going by what we have this year gives us 172?
Because if we take Danbury, we have 7 this year, times 4 is 28. That's over the cap. If I take New Milford, which is 10,
Okay, so
times
you're
4
going by
years
the
is
caps.
40, I'm over the cap. So those are the things that we had to take into consideration. I'm sorry.
I think that I have a feeling that the best way to deal with, and then also when we figure this out, the numbers go up. In other words, the loss goes down somewhat. Well, in 6,
There's a point where the loss turns into revenue.
well, then it falls apart again. Well, no. In 7, it turns into revenue after whatever this is, year 4, right? Year 5. And then hits a loss way down in year 20, which is an improvement on year 6, which is, it's showing all
Version 6, I mean.
version 6, which is showing profit for a long time and then loss. So I'm kind of torn between here because my whole sensation is that we have these caps that we're dealing with and we have these other unknowns. You would think that as we manage to improve the program and as we manage to move the cap up from 15 to 25 at one point, we can possibly, with the developments that are going on in those school systems, move the caps up again another 2 or 3 students, based on the fact that, and this was because I was in the meeting in last year. Wow, seems like a decade ago, but it was only last year, last March or April, and we went and met with the superintendent, the legal team, and the head of finance, and the mayor Danbury. And although they were committing to the concept of there being an expense to sending a child to Region 12 or to Nonawag or anywhere, I felt they were also, and if they're watching this, think about this, because I know they have time to watch our board meetings. They also were similarly complaining about the fact that their buildings are overcrowded and they get hundreds of new kids every year, and they have to build new buildings, and they can't stand that. So I think though they were focused on simply the cost of sending kids here, that's one example of the bean counting will change, I think. And that could happen in New Milford too. That could happen anywhere. So I think we really should establish this as not, I was all for the lowest, the worst case scenario all along as we dealt with these things, right? But we're actually in the thick of it now. And we can't let our worst case scenario keep sliding. Because year after year, let's say something happens next year and I don't know what. Whatever could happen next year. Somebody raises their cap, lowers their cap more. Or one town bails out completely. Or who knows what. Then we're going, we're going to project this. We had a certain projected enrollment that we embarked on this with, when we really finally embarked, as opposed to all the very glorious projected enrollments that we had for 2 years, 3 years before that. I think we really need to try to maintain that projection and fight for it, as opposed to saying, this is harder than we thought. And that's, the way Anthony put it, I think he's a little jumpier about it, but I don't think that we shouldn't treat this as failure, but we also shouldn't treat it as any kind of loosening of our resolve. So I would like to see a projection based on figuring out in good faith how we can manage 2 more kids so we can stay with where we were. Because there's only 2 kids. We could coax New Milford into 22. Or we might have towns that only sent a couple. And I hope you're listening too, New Milford. That's the way I feel. I feel, that we don't need to treat this as abject failure, and I don't think it should be treated that way at all, obviously. But I also don't think we should look at this and go, yeah, good enough.
I don't think we do.
Okay.
Stephanie?
Are we voting on a new version?
No.
Or is this just for presentation purposes?
Presentation.
Okay, well, then I feel like what we do every year from here going forward is present with the most up-to-date information that we have, which is the best that we can do every year without talking about, we've been talking a lot about what ifs tonight. What does the cap really mean to me? Could we potentially stretch this? We could, and we know we can. But I think what you present in hard numbers has to be factually, what do I have today and how do I base it on that information? I don't think this has been a conversation at all about resolve and what we want to do and what we're aspiring to doing. I think this is just a presentation based on the numbers we have today. And if things don't change or improve, this is what we have to bank on. I don't, again, if we're not voting on something, if this isn't changing, if this doesn't need to be, an official new mandate of what we're saying that agri-science is going to become, I'm not sure what we're debating here.
Okay, I realize now what I'm thinking. You're right. We're not voting on anything. We're not changing anything. But I guess my feeling is I don't want to start a habit of having a reality that changes due to whatever factors and then going, oh, well, this is going to turn out differently, as opposed to looking at it and saying, okay, now this is our projection. What are we going to do to make sure this doesn't actually become reality? And I think that's what it needs to be under the auspices of saying, okay, we're off here by 2. Obviously, we could say we're going to add 30 kids a year. Hooray. We don't want to just prognosticate grandiosely for no reason. But I think this should cause us to figure out how we're going to commit to changing this, as opposed to just watching it change, by itself, good or bad, year over year.
But that's a marketing discussion. That's not what, this is not like a marketing presentation.
Lisa?
I agree with Jen. And after working with Megan for, what has it been, 7 months, I've never heard her, or I don't anticipate her to ever say, this is good enough. She's worked really hard to get us where we are today. And so our projections, and that's what it is a projection, and our program hasn't even started yet. So before we even start, I don't think we should be going down a path of being negative, and I don't think this is as good as it's going to get. It's a projection because we don't know, right? But knowing you, I know that these numbers aren't as good as it's going to get. So, and I don't think that this is memorializing where we're going. I mean, we've done great things, and I think we just need to stay positive and stay on that path.
So let me be clear about this. I haven't called anyone or anything a failure. Have I?
No, Anthony, but you also don't need to get angry at me because I didn't say. You asked for you asked first. You asked for opinions. I'm giving you my opinion, so then don't get angry at me, please. I don't know who said a failure or who said this is as good as it's going to get, but it wasn't me, and I think that's very unfair to say to whoever said it, to say it to our superintendent.
I think the point is I don't think anybody.
Please don't yell at me when you've asked for my opinion.
I don't think anybody said it. That's my point.
It was said.
Who said it was a failure? Yeah, but it was a
mischaracterization. I said we shouldn't call this.
I don't think we should say it. If that's just words out there,
said it shouldn't be called an abject failure.
I don't think those words should be used. This is not as good as it's going to get, and it's not a failure. And I don't even know why we're having this discussion like this because they're just projections.
Greg.
I really got to say that we should get off this topic right now and hear for it, because what we've got here is a situation in which we're trying to put projections up on the board. The day that place opens and those horses are running around out there and you've got the animals in their cages and being tended to and everything else, and you've got programs going on here, it's the whole thing is you might as well throw out your projections because it's going to be a different scenario at that point in time. You're going to have a lot more interest. The other thing I think you have to recognize is we have a lot more interest than we thought there was going to be there. And while towns have caps, they put caps on for a reason, and that's to have some control going forward because they're looking at a budget, and if all of a sudden they think that instead of $140,000, it's going to cost them $240,000. They have the same concerns we do. But if there are 2 extra kids in that town that want to go above their cap, I don't think that the cities with budgets, tremendously large budgets, are going to say, gee, we really don't want to send those extra 2 kids. And I think the towns that are undersubscribed in terms of the ones that don't have a cap are going to start sending more. And I think we really ought to stop navel gazing, stop with this kind of thing, and putting out this. If I hear the F word one more time, and it's not the usual F word that I'm accused of using, but the one I keep hearing here, I'm going to scream, because we really have got to stop taking that position. This is going to be a rousing success, and if we can move to the next part of the meeting, I'll show you why.
Michelle.
I want to just move off of the enrollment because I have a question looking at 6 versus 7. Just going across the bottom line, which, and it's interesting that we're not talking about any of the other variables that have changed to the positive, which is that debt service has gone down because we had favorable interest rates. So actually, if you look over the time period, there's actually more income than in version 6. But I wanted to ask about the operating cost because version 7 has a lower operating cost total than version 6. And could you explain why?
So there were some assumptions made in Model 6 that were estimates of things that we now have, things like electricity, sewer usage, instructional supplies. FF&E wasn't contemplated to be at the number to supply the equipment that it's supplying. So instructional supplies were much higher in version 6. We also have better information about health insurance and how that trends over 5-year periods. Version 6 just compounded it over all 20 years, which doesn't happen. As you know, we make adjustments to our plans, what percentages employees pay, whether or not there's high deductibles. So to compound medical insurance the way it was compounded in the prior model over 20 years, 20-year models are hard to work with. But you can't just compound everything all the way across and then not change your revenue, which this model doesn't do. This model does not contemplate an increase in revenue, which it's that way because your prior models didn't. If this were my model to start with, I would have contemplated an increase in revenue, because to think that you're going to get the same tuition from the state in sending towns at year 20 that you're getting at year 1 is not a logical assumption to make. But I left it again so that you can compare apples to apples. The other thing I think that's important about this projection is this isn't my dream on paper. I want to show you what's happened since your last model. The reason the model had to be changed was because we over-projected enrollment in years 1 to 3. So to have the conversation about what we're projecting now could land us back in the same place. We don't want to over-project. We don't want to over-promise. And if you look at this model, you don't have to, because the numbers are much more in our favor because of the variables that we now know to be constants. We were really successful with our debt. We saved a ton of money on what the debt projection was between version 6 and version 7. That in and of itself fixes this model. So when you look at the revenue stream in this model compared to version 6, this is a much stronger model. And yes, we're not hitting the projections that we hit in version 6, but that's why we're here, because the projections that we projected in years 1, 2, and 3 of version 6 completely turned this model upside down and created these large deficits that we're seeing in the first 3 years that we didn't see in the last model. How are we going to fix it? This is how we're going to fix it. And we're not going to overpromise projection because we can fix it without having to do so. But to think that we're not going to go out and get the enrollment is not true either. But we don't want to be 3 years from now in the same boat we're in because we overprojected year 5, which is where we would be if we are going to put those numbers on paper. But this is what does this look like, and does this program work? And I think that this projection shows the program works, and it works well.
Thank you.
Michael.
Pardon my mathematical ignorance here, English teacher, okay? So this is a little bit of a challenge for me. But I'm looking at your version 6, and I'm looking at your new version, version 7. And two of the distinctions that you drew is that version 6 was based upon that number of 139, which is familiar to all of us. But you've changed that to 155. And could you walk us through one more time why you actually upped that number? Because by doing that, it seems like we're actually going to be better off. Is that a correct assumption to make?
We're going to be better off with regard to state grants generated by our own students. So the version 7 model actually has less students from sending towns, but more of our own students.
Okay, so that 155 is totally made up by an increase within Region 12 itself.
Correct.
Okay. So is that the reason why the net loss that you're projecting would be greater in version 7 than it would be in version 6?
The net loss is not greater.
So it looks like you have, looking at the bottom right-hand corner there, 1.449.
It's not a loss.
It's not a loss. That would be.
That's not a loss. No.
Okay, so that would be.
In the version 6 model,
And in the version 6, what would be that number?
the negative 186,673.
Okay, so that's a pretty dramatic difference between the two.
Yes.
And what would that positive difference in your version be attributed to?
The debt service is substantially less,
Okay.
and operating costs have been trued up for what we know going into years 1 and 2, and then inflation adjusted with more accuracy.
Okay.
Greg?
I hate to say it, but this evening's entire discussion has been a case, if you look outside, the sun's up, the flowers are blooming, the grass is green, and the first comments out of our mouths are, what a dump. I mean, really, people, if the projections are better, the amount of income over 20 years, the better position we're in is over $1,400,000 better position, $1,550,000 better position over 20 years, with fewer projected students coming from outside the region, more inside the region, and still the numbers are $1.5 million better over 20 years. Guys, I admit we didn't have this chart soon enough before the meeting. Maybe if it was here a year before, we could have gotten to it. But the fact of the matter is, we're in better shape. We should stop standing here using the failure word and other things. This is actually a raging success. I don't know. It's like that line in the movie Apollo 13 where the one person says, if this goes bad, it's going to be a disaster. And of course, Gene Kranz says, no, it's going to be our finest hour. Well, that's exactly what I think we're looking at here.
Jen?
I just want to thank Nicole, because I know it's hard to walk into a situation where you have to work on Bob's numbers. We say Bob's name all the time. It feels like you probably know him really well. So I just appreciate, I can imagine how difficult it is to have to keep working on Bob's numbers and not being able to find Nicole's numbers and find your spot. So I just want to thank you for all of your hard work. I appreciate all that you're doing and coming here and speaking. I know it's not easy to be in the hot seat. So I just want to thank you. And I also just want to say that I wholeheartedly believe that I agree with Lisa. You're never going to settle for anything less. So I'm not worried. So
Thank you.
John?
I've been studying these numbers for about 4 years now, the enrollment projections in that. I honestly think it's far better than I anticipated, but we're really not going to get a true picture of the actual enrollment probably until year 4 or beyond. The numbers are good because I know historically Danbury, for instance, there was 3 years ago 7 students for all four grades. Brookfield was 3 students for all 4 grades. So these numbers are promising. I don't know. Technically, the legality of a cap doesn't exist because all the sending towns did when they signed their agreements was it wasn't even a promise. It was a willingness to send above their 3-year average. So it's very unpredictable, but that's the caution. As the enrollment of the sending towns declines, I know Danbury would be the exception, but most of these sending towns are losing population. So I think, in year 4 or beyond, we're going to get a better idea of what they're willing to send. Technically, they don't have to send any, but I think it's too early to project. I think 108 is right about it's pretty optimistic even from where I sit, having studied the enrollments.
Okay, next.
I thought I was in the Twilight
I
Zone.
have to say that out loud. If he's happy, I'm happy. Wow, I wasn't expecting that. Well, that's what I mean. If you're optimistic, then I'm optimistic.
I know, moving on. That's what I was thinking.
Okay, we are getting there. This is a very interesting hole because that's the one that was originally 20 feet deep into which we are putting a water tank.
Greg, your mic.
Head it on. Where we are putting a water tank with 40,000 gallon capacity to fight fires if need be. That's the sprinkler system water tank that's going under there. That tank itself, as I think I might have mentioned to you, empty, weighs 300,000 pounds, and full weighs about 620,000 pounds. It's now buried. They're pretty much up to the ground by now, and that's it. So we're making big progress out there. They'll start the building. This is what used to be the mansard roof on the side of the pool. And you will see that when you tear off the mansard roof, we have done a Pompidou Center thing with all of the infrastructure on the outside of the building. That's going to be put back inside, and that will have a different treatment on it, but we just love that mansard roof. We are going to be removing a substantial part of the mansard roof for this construction project, and it will not reappear. As soon as we get the rest of it off, the happier we'll be. I don't know. No, I don't think so. This is another shot inside the north end of the building. That all of that material you see laying out there is pretty much gone now. It's being incorporated into the structure. I think this is another shot of the tank. That's the top of it after it had been installed. It's 75 feet long, about 9 or 10 feet across, and an equal depth. So it's a pretty large tank. You see another picture there of it. I don't know why they're fixated on this, but they clearly love it. This is behind the pool, and those are the beginnings of the structures to pour the footings. And they've now poured that footing, and they're continuing. That footing is now going to be heading off away from the building as that foot is the footing for the north addition to the building. This is a picture inside looking at the north end of the building, the far north wall. That is the wall. So they're going to be I think they've now torn down the exterior wall, which was that Tyvek all over it, and they have actually put in plastic sheets over what the windows are to keep the air from blowing in until they get the windows installed, which will come in at a later date once more construction is out of the way. This is the hallway, which shows you that you will get those windows at the top are to bring light from the outside into this hallway and through the windows on the right side into the classrooms on the other side. This is how they try to get a little bit more light, exterior light, into interior rooms. These are just more pictures down in that north end. Those walls have all been framed and now sheetrocked. This is all sort of not there anymore. What you see there are electric lines that go into the walls. You see those little vertical pipes that are short. That actually is going into the wall so that you have a switch or some other feature down below or a plug. You see your air conditioning, HVAC pipes going through the structure, and this is starting to pick up. I don't know why those bricks are on the edges of the scaffolding, but it is very artful. And I think that's more or less what we have. So, as you can see, construction is moving along. There's a couple of dates I'd like to talk about because you will be getting a project report, an updated project report soon, and you will note that The site work date, the original date was September 4 of this year for completion. It's been kicked out to October 4. That's not a bad thing. What that reflects is not the site work like driveways and that kind of sidewalks. That's the site work for plantings. And they decided they didn't want to be finishing the planting in July and August, and they wanted to put some more of it into September. So that's why that date's been kicked out. So don't worry about that. We're still on track. We're still on target. The pump house date has been kicked out from May 17 to June 12th. And the reason for that is that the only way we could have held the May 17th date was to pay another $8,625 for the electric switchgear going in there. And there was absolutely no reason to do that because the June 12th completion date will not affect any other completion dates for the project. So it's just a question of whether we could save a little money by not keeping that date and letting it go almost a month. The areas B and C, that would be the south areas, those have been kicked out from July 1, 2019 to September 3, 2019. And that basically is the result of bumping out the end of the school year by 4 days. The 4-day increase for the snow days caused them not to be able to do that work in the time zone that they needed to do it, and it pushed it out 2 months. So that's unfortunately the way it is. But it's not going to affect the completion date of the project or the schools. It just means that particular piece of it will be a little bit later. And so that is where those dates are. The construction manager's contingency has gone up from $1,090,000 to $1,093,000. They recovered something back that they didn't anticipate. And our owner's contingency has dropped from $108,000 to $81,949, considering change orders we haven't acted on yet, but are likely to act on. And so in addition to that amount of money, we're holding another about $500,000 in allowances with various trade contractors, not all of which will be used. So right now we have about $1,600,000 cushion on it, and the job continues to be under budget and on time.
No, I think that's next.
The
Nicole, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, the financial status, I just wanted to confirm that we did finally actually receive our first payment from the state. It's in our bank account, which is exciting news. Now they will start flowing every 60 days. I also, from financial status with our project soft costs, we're going to have to shift some money within those line items because after meeting with our insurance agent, I found out that our builder's risk policy does not run long enough. So I needed to get a 3-month extension. And it looks like that is going to be an additional cost to the builder's risk, which was a project-based policy. So when I have those numbers, I'll share them to the board. But we do have some movement in our soft cost portion of the budget, so we can get that covered by moving some line items. And I already shared the bond and band results, which is related, but you know those results. So, any questions?
Thank you. Nope, too late. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering if the state has opened the science lab portion yet?
They have not.
What are they doing? Okay, thanks. Good, because that's crazy.
What's
Sorry.
the lady from Castle Boost?
Oh,
Next
she's
item.
next. She's next.
Okay, so moving to item 6A. Do you want to introduce?
We have Jennifer from Castle Booze. She has been working on our furniture, fixtures, and equipment budget with us. She's also been in this project a long time with us, so she's been very familiar with our team, very patient with us. But we definitely appreciate during FF&E there's been a lot of back and forth, looking at some documents that started back in 2015, dusting off binders, making certain we've got updated costs. But what she's going to present to us tonight is what we're going to go forward to the state on and has been presented to our building committee in advance.
Okay, I'll share. Thanks.
Okay. I don't know if this is. Good evening. As the construction is progressing and we're hoping to get ready for some spaces to be ready this coming up school year, we need to make sure that furniture, fixtures, equipment are available and ready to be procured, whether we're bidding it or buying things off state contract, that you have these things in time. So, although we've already been meeting with the state multiple times for construction, they do require that we go in front of them specifically for furniture, fixtures, and equipment. They have not yet approved that package. So we're helping the district prepare all the documentation to go to the state on Wednesday this week. We will be presenting them with, there's drawings and specification project manual books. This is the biggest of them. We need to present to them for the science grant for that project. It needs to be separated out what equipment and furniture is going to be in that project, what we are going to be planning to, well, with the district, what they would get off of state contract and what they would potentially bid. And then for the AgSTEM project, we had to develop drawings, specifications, cut sheets, and everything for the same thing. What are they going to potentially bid versus buy off state contract? And we've tried to work from state contract when possible to make some selections. That's mostly typical tables, chairs, desks, that kind of thing. A lot of the specialty agri-science equipment is planned to be bid. This being the agri-science bid book, this is the monster of them all. It has items, the state is very particular about how they like things to be presented to them. So every item that we plan for agri-science, there's pictures and data, specifications on all these items. The science book is much smaller. But we've worked with the district to review all the specialty agri-science equipment that in the fall of 2017 a package had been put together. That's been gone through with a fine-tooth comb now to make sure that those pieces of equipment are still desirable, the quantities are correct. The district has gone through all of that. And there's been feedback back and forth so that we make sure we can get in front of the state only the equipment that if we needed to weed anything out between fall of 2017 and now, we've done it. We had not previously selected with the district general furniture such as tables, chairs, desks, that kind of thing. So recently we've worked with the district on what are their needs for that typical furniture that needs to go in every room. We work with vendors. We make sure that they can meet the timelines required. It's a phased project, so we need to make sure that we can get pieces in time and work up budgets and all of that. So it's been a lot of back and forth with the district. They've selected all the technology equipment. As we know, technology changes quite often. So very recently, they've been going through all the technology that's required to support the new program spaces and the science rooms. They've provided that to us so that now we have quantities, models, cost estimates for those. What I passed out to you is the cost estimate that we're bringing to the state. We have a very detailed one that the state requires showing every single item, but that is a breakdown for each project. The first page is for the AgSTEM project and second is for science. The top of each page has all of what we call typical FF&E, furniture, fixtures, equipment, or maybe non-typical for AgSTEM. And the lower part of each page has the technology items. Just a lump sum of what they are. There are columns for eligibility and ineligibility. We make our best assumption, given some guidelines from the state, but the state is going to have the final say on what they will take as eligible versus ineligible equipment. Things such as consumables. There were, disposable gloves, books. There's some small wares that they might not for kitchen equipment. There's things that they may not allow for eligibility. So that's also on the sheet. And we go through every single item with the state on Wednesday. And I don't know if it'll take longer than that. It may take longer. Do you have any questions? Go ahead, Michelle.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding this part. So I'm looking at the summary sheet, and the ineligible for the state grant, or ineligible to be bid, ineligible for what?
So I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question, but perhaps there's two categories. There's state contract.
Okay.
And then there's bid items. The state makes us indicate for every single item whether our intent is, or your intent is, to purchase it from a state contract, which those are already, I don't know if you're familiar with the state contracts that they have, but the state has already worked with certain vendors for various equipment. So there are many state contracts out there. Some of those things we can purchase off a state contract. We have to tell the state what the state contract number is and the whole thing. Those items don't have to be bid. You can go direct and purchase those.
Okay.
Other items would be bid. So it's not about your state grant. It's state contract items versus bid items. And we're still trying to, with the available soft costs, get everything to come into, not to go over what the state grant amount has been.
So it's not that it's ineligible for the grant, it's ineligible to be bid?
You won't get reimbursement.
Okay, so it is ineligible for
It
the
is
grant.
eligible for the.
Okay, I mean, it's a small portion. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding what the categories meant. So when we look at the total, the 667, oh,
Yes.
how ironic, or 677, sorry. That is the total needed for the program, but only the 562 is eligible for state grant?
From bid plus the 78,000 that we can purchase off a state contract. So I don't do math well in my head, but so there's over $600,000. The only thing out of the
Okay, so everything but the 26.
Everything but the 26, yes.
Okay, and the 26 needs to come from operating, I'm assuming, because that's stuff we need to run the program? Okay.
We'll decide where our soft costs go, so we can pick those things up in our soft costs.
Okay, oh, you need to use your microphone. All right.
Sorry, do you
Yeah,
want me to
there's
say
already
that
been
again?
some monies allotted for the project as a whole, I guess, right? So outside of operating, if,
Okay.
yeah.
So it could come out of the grant, not from the state FF&E. Got it. All right, thank you.
Yes.
She thought her question was stupid. Wait till you get mine.
Oh, I didn't think it was.
This cost. No, you said this may be a silly question, but it wasn't. Whereas mine is really dumb. These category lines, are these for the actual large animals or for fixtures that are associated with large animals? Thank you. See?
Right.
Told you a stupid question.
Oh, that's not stupid.
State
And
will not
maple
buy us
syrup,
an actual
that's a lot of
horse.
maple-
Alan, there's everything in that book, from a tractor to the brushes you use to brush a dog. I mean, there's everything in there. And of course, some things were ineligible. The pink and blue bows for the dogs when they're done were not allowed.
But not the actual large and small animals. That was
No.
the question. That's a different budget line then, huh? All right.
Right. It's only the equipment associated with the care,
Yeah.
care and maintenance of them.
Equipment, yeah.
You want a motion?
It's not a furniture or a fixture or
Anthony?
equipment.
Right.
All right, so, Anthony, Jeff, I'd like to make a motion to approve the final plans and project manuals as prepared for the furniture fixtures and equipment grant based on the recommendations of the staff, design, and construction professionals for state review. As presen-
Second.
As presented to us tonight.
Okay. Motion's been put on the floor and seconded. Any questions, comments? If not, all those,
Thank you. I guess the only other question I would have would be for either Megan or Nicole. Are we feeling good that this FF&E lines up meets our curricular needs, and are there things that we need that fall outside of this?
We have been constantly evolving with this. So there have been things that came off, in the past. We had a CNC machine, we had a lathe. Those came off. Other things came on, like a virtual dressage horse. So to say that we're also taking a look at how can we make certain that we're adding some technical functions into our equipment. I'd say to you, we feel I have to go to the state, so I wanted to make certain that it looks right. We've been going back and forth. There's been a lot of chefs in the soup, and there's been a lot of, I can tell you, there's been a lot of errors that we found. There were, I tell this story often, but there was go ahead.
I don't know if you want to tell that story.
No, it's all good. But
did you get the email?
Yes,
from
I did.
Casey about?
We found the face masks.
Good. Okay.
But to say to you, but there were numbers. But it's good to know that they were being questioned. To sit there and say we had a strange number of jackets versus face masks, and some kids were going to go without face masks, and so to know it made us dig deeper. And whether or not we eventually found them, it became to say to you we were turning over lots of rocks, and to say we were finding things that really weren't matching together. We got to that level of detail, and we were making that kind of correction, and we were going back and forth with Council Booth, pulling Don in. What were the electricity outlets? Did we have all of those things accounted for? Because they're going to go through each and every item, down to the screws that we're ordering in the different shops. So we wanted to make certain we had the right numbers and quantities.
Good. Thank you very much for all that work, too.
just Greg?
Well, John had something to add.
John, who first?
Just to be clear, we are approving the list, but not the actual dollar amounts because they could change. Is that correct? I mean, these are fluid amounts. These are not.
There's contingency associated. They are just estimates. Some things you're going to bid. A lot of it you're going to bid.
Yeah.
So you don't know where that's.
We're not really approving a number because we don't know that number.
Not really, but the state does want
The plans and
board-
project manual.
you to.
Motions.
Right.
Yeah, actually, we're talking in terms of dollars, but some of those dollars, as you've heard, have not exactly been done. Now, this fits in with what our expectation. This is what our expectation was. So we haven't, between this and the parts of this that are included within the construction contracts we've let, don't total more than the $1.5 million, whatever it was, 550, 505. I can't remember now.
1505.
Yeah, 1505. Yeah. So
Right.
we're still within that number. That hasn't
Yes.
changed.
Well below it.
And, well, no, you're actually not, because there's some items that are included within the construction contracts that we've already bid and approved.
Right.
That were FF&E. In other words, certain kinds of fixed
Right.
counters and other things were part
Okay.
of the construction. So actually, we are spending the whole amount of the $1,505,000. The other thing I would say is that the building committee has issued this very same approval motion at its meeting, and so both the building committee and the Board of Ed need to do that in order for the superintendent to sign it and take it to the state. So
that is 100% reimbursable. Is that
What's that?
100%?
What's 100%?
Whatever the total cost.
Well, the $1,505,000 of that, $26,371.28 is not reimbursable. So it's about 1.9% or something. We're just under around 2%. 26 over 1,505.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't do that calculation.
Yeah, me either.
Okay. Any other comments? All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. The motion passes unanimously. Thank Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, item
On
D.
1.7%.
What's the big role?
To consider and if appropriate, approve a reach tuition increase for the 2019-20 school year. Megan?
Okay. In your board packet, you will notice we had laid out for you the current cost of our Reach tuition program. And as we've been analyzing all of our tuition in costs and the costs of the program in totality, we wanted to, at this point, bring to your attention, our Reach tuition has not increased since its inception. Currently, if they are in district, a half-day program is $900, full day is $1,500, and that's for the full year. Additionally, if it's an out-of-district family, it's $3,750 for a half-day and $7,500 for a full day. Right now, our recommendation, if you look at what is the operational cost of Reach, we're not going to cover the cost of Reach. And I think part of it is we're offering a service to our community. This is their first time in the door, and we want to make certain that they're coming through the Region 12 schools. At this time, I did have Ellie do the analysis, and usually between 3 and 5 students don't actually go through our kindergarten program from the Reach program. But out of the 41 students we serve, I think we're still seeing the benefit of hosting the program, getting them into our schools, having the opportunity where if there is a need, early intervention can happen sooner rather than later, and we're meeting our child find obligation. However, when we do look at what the cost is to operate, as you can see, our current Reach tuition revenue is $37,000 when our cost is $284,000 to run. So my recommendation is right now it's a 20% increase, but if you look, it takes our half day to $1,080, it takes a full day to $1,800. So we're not looking to hurt our families in any way, but we also recognize that some of the other preschools that are in the area are significantly more expensive. I don't think that we're necessarily going to go for that private tuition cost, but I do think that at this time, in order to start to cover some of those supply costs, buses, capture some of the costs, my recommendation is a 20% increase at this time.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All right. Any questions?
I have a question.
Michelle?
I was just wondering, so for Reach, students can be there for 2 years. They're 3s and 4s. We have 2 students that are out of district. The 20% on the in-district, I think seems very reasonable, and families can plan for that pretty easily. I don't think it's unreasonable, the increase on the out-of-district either. I'm only concerned about the 2 that we already have. I would hate to disrupt a program. You know, if there are 3, we're planning on coming again. I wouldn't want them to consider moving their child. You know, transition is hard for children, and I wouldn't want to create a financial burden for those. I don't even know if those 2 students are 3s or 4s, but that's my only concern with this model. I feel that the 20% is fair for all out-of-district new coming in, and that the 20% is fair for everybody for the in-district. So that I would just ask that we consider, if those 2 out-of-district students are 3s, that we maybe grandfather them. If they're 4s, it's a non-issue. And yeah, that would be my only comment.
Did you say 37 of the 39 stay in Region 12?
Typically, yes. I said between 2 to 5 when we did our, I had Ellie do a 5-year look between 2 and 5. Do not continue on to a Region 12 school kindergarten.
Greg?
I'm going to offer a slightly different view on this. We have a total cost of $284,000 and a tuition income of $37,000. It pays a fraction of the cost. To be perfectly honest, I don't see why we should. This may be not the year to do it, but really think we should be going toward eliminating the tuition and making this what you get when you come to Region 12. You get universal pre-K. I think that would be a big reason why people might want to come here. It might attract a lot of people, and it sort of goes in the concept because, frankly, what the tuition pays almost none of the cost. So we're already absorbing the cost. So before we jack the tuition up and get to the point where we can never offer universal, now's the time to go for it.
Sure.
That's interesting. I kind of like that. I want to point out, though, and I'm not really sure exactly how the cost was put together, but we are required to have a preschool program for our students with special needs, and we have to balance that with traditional students. I forget the right word. But so when we originally expanded our REACH program we used to have a lottery program, and then we dropped the lottery and said we would take everyone. It was because we were filling empty space, just like in our other classrooms. We didn't hire more teachers, at least not at the original inception. We may have over the years. I'm trying to remember. I don't think we added a third classroom. All right. So, but I think the first two classrooms we require. So we can't say that it's not the full 284 is the cost of the program, because some of it we're required to have. So just to keep that all in perspective, we added a nominal tuition for in-district people when we opened the doors to everyone. So it was never intended to cover the entire cost, because we had to. We're obligated to have most of this program anyway.
Michael?
I agree with Greg as far as the spirit of looking at universal pre-K and for all. I think that's wonderful. I just think that this year is probably not a good year to do that, considering that we've got a very ambitious program that we're looking at. So I'm just not sure if this is the year. I think maybe even as soon as next year we could be looking at it, or the year after, especially if we can get a little bit more sense of what that cost would be to the district. I'd like to see those numbers before we kind of embark on something aspirational. And then just my question to you, Megan, as far as the costs for pre-K that you looked at, are we, with your 20% increase, how low are we? Or would we be still the lowest option for, and significantly lower, or just slightly lower? I mean, where would you be putting us?
Locally, another preschool is for a half day and not getting Fridays, $13,000 a year. So to say to you, we really are a phenomenal deal. And I do want, Michelle, you're absolutely right. There is some of the cost. It would be one of the classrooms and a bus. But nonetheless, it's one to say it is a consideration. Which direction do people want to go in? But this is right now what we're able to capture for this year.
Michelle?
I just also want to point out that we would have to always charge tuition for out-of-district students, or
Well, it's one way to solve our enrollment.
I mean, I guess, but I mean, we can't. I mean, we just free preschool. We don't care where you live. That really wouldn't work at all. So we always have to charge that, and it's still, as Megan said, considerably less than other options. So if people are looking at preschool, they're certainly going to be thinking about giving us a try. And for the in-district, it's very nominal. So I like what Greg is saying. I don't think we're very far off of that, so I'm okay with the recommendation.
Which recommendation?
The one we.
No, your recommendation. I liked yours.
Okay.
I like Michelle's slightly altered recommendation.
Well, right.
Ellen?
With the caveat, I don't know how to put those two students in.
But,
Yeah.
so,
Does Megan know if the two students are third grade or fourth grade?
3-year-olds or 4-year-olds.
3 or 4, I'm sorry.
I can look.
Good, while you're looking.
while you're
Ellen?
looking, so I guess this is extra budgetary, because this will end up with a whopping $7,500 increase that we will fold into the budget somehow, I guess. Since we were doing this an hour after finalizing the
No,
budget.
it's against the revenue line, which John pointed out was estimated.
Oh,
This is one of those estimates that's going to move north.
hooray!
So,
All right, I guess I'm just wondering whether it's worth it. But I suppose if it's necessary, it is. It really is a tiny number. And I'm just wondering if we shouldn't wait till we get to the point of what Greg is suggesting, and then raise. I don't know. It's safe enough, I think, if we do what Michelle suggested and grandfather the existing out of.
I'll amend my motion to go with the superintendent's recommendation, but if either of the two out-of-district students are 3 years old, that they be at the same tuition for either of those two students
For the next year.
for the next year.
Did I
Greg?
second?
You sure?
Yeah, just so you get a sense of perspective here, if I don't know what portion of this REACH program costs we have to spend anyway, but what I can tell you is that the total cost of this program, considering the tuition offset we currently get, is 1.1% of our budget. If we were to make it free tuition for the in-town, I recognize it's not going to be the people not in the district. The in-district people, if that were free, instead of 1.1%, it would be 1.2%. In fact, I think it's 1.15 versus 1.2. So it's less than 1/100% of our budget. And we're sitting here worried about whether we should just simply declare this as a reason to move to the region. And boy, you could advertise this. My guess is you're going to pick up a few people who are going to come here just on principle or because they like this program or want this program. And I really think and to attract people with young children, what are we talking about? The other thing is, don't forget, when we went to everybody in there, now you've got children for whom we have to provide REACH, and you've got other children who want to come into it. That's got to be a wonderful circumstance for every child in the program. And so I think this is one opportunity where we just should not be so cheap to worry about 1/100%.
Julie?
Well, just to offer the opposite perspective is, not everybody, there's a lot of kids in this program, a lot of families in our district, and they're not going to perhaps look at it that way. They're going to look at it as all of a sudden REACH is free. And I just don't know if that's the right message to send this year with all the changes and the budget challenges. It makes a lot of sense, Greg, but that's going to be the word on the street, that all of a sudden REACH is free. And the board gave away all that money. So just something, another way to think about it.
And to Alan's question, if you do say REACH is free, that's not in the budget. So if you do get a flood of students and we have to hire, we're out of budget and we're going to have to take it from someplace else. So,
We could make one.
You could-
We've
you
tried
could-
not
you
to.
could- You could
We've
do
tried
that.
to
I'm just
adjust the
pointing
schedule.
that out, that it's,
Yeah, cap our own students. What an ironic situation.
Greg?
Yeah, I was going to say, I get that. And part of the problem is we're sitting here tonight, we don't know what the impact would be if we made it free. And I admit that probably we'd have to know that impact before we did it. But I'm just a little concerned about putting REACH a little further out of reach by increasing the amount of tuition. Because every time you increase that, then it's no longer a 1/100%. It gets more and more, as time goes on. What I think we really should do is we should, by next year's budget, have some kind of a study or some kind of a survey to try to find out how many kids we have in the district, how many are likely to come into the REACH program if it's a public benefit. And are we really talking about, if everybody went whole hog and just took a flyer on REACH, we'd end up with 15 more kids in the program, which isn't going to break the bank. Might mean another professional in there, but it's not going to break the bank. And so I think the question becomes, we should know what the cost is likely to be, and we should be prepared to act on it, because I think this is a game changer in terms of our recruitment ability if we handle it correctly. And now the superintendent's very upset with me because here I'm spending all the money on the Ag STEM program and the facilities committee, and now I'm asking to spend more. But I just think this is so important.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? I'm sorry, Debbie, did you get it?
You can change your vote if you have not. Until it's
I'm the same.
They don't want to join the opposition.
Yeah. All right, so the motion passes. All right, we're on to, I think, 9210. So this, is this, yeah, this is a second reading of 9210. If you recall, it's the qualification of board members. You have, this is a new bylaw. So, 9210, qualifications of members.
Oh, yeah, second reading.
Right. So, but wasn't here for the first one. What was-
Yeah,
what was
so,
your-
yeah, so this is the one, Greg just wanted to, he asked about our ability as a board to actually have any say over who's allowed to be a member. So I spoke with Cabe, or well, emailed back and forth. And there are two state statutes. One, the definition of an elector, and the other one is board member compensation. So we added the legal references to the bylaw so that we could see where that came from. And one thing that we didn't really discuss the first time, we were kind of looking at the elector and the age, but the fact that they must be a resident of our district is very important. You can't serve on our board but not live here. So that's pretty much all that was discussed.
So, Michael?
I don't have a point on this. Once we're finished with our discussion on C, my suggestion is that we hold off on D through I just because of the time, and we move to executive session.
Let's get through this one first.
Sure, definitely.
Okay.
Stop the train. Started.
Anthony,
Jim?
I move we approve 9210 qualifications of members for second reading.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, the motion passes to adopt the bylaw 9210. And you'd like to bypass this. All I'm going to say is that the bylaws committee worked really hard to get this list, and the backlog is growing. And I really want to avoid a special meeting to drain everything before the school year's out, because half this board won't be, well, almost half this board is up for re-election. And if that would mean that we'd have to go back to committee and resend all those bylaws back, and I don't think anybody wants to do that. So I'll take it off the agenda. It's fine, but the list is growing.
Can we do it in mass? I move D through I be approved for first reading.
We can do, if everybody's read and familiar with it and comfortable with that, Jim, we could absolutely move it to second reading. We have a motion on the floor to move
D through I.
D through I to second reading.
Process are great. They're really good.
Second.
No, but second reading doesn't come back to us. It goes on. Right.
No,
Well, we could make an exception.
we could not do it.
Hold the one that you want to.
Well, you can ask a question
Yeah.
while it's.
Take his mic away from him.
Twice, in fact.
Ask one question, ask it.
Well, the only problem is because you insist on using Google Docs, I have no ability to write on it what I want, so I can't find it.
Get an iPad. Good, what's the question? Which one?
He's looking.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Lisa did.
Somebody did. Yeah, Lisa did.
All right, I'm just going to go along with it, and I'll move to take it off the consent agenda next
Yeah,
time.
take that one item off the consent agenda, not.
Not the whole enchilada, yeah, no,
If you come up with a question, if you could send it to me in advance, maybe I can answer your question offline, one-on-one.
it wasn't a big question, it was a
But-
little question.
All right, well, let me know what it is, and if,
Trust us. You're gonna love it.
Thank you. All right, so we have a motion on the floor
Good. thinking.
All those in favor to move items D through I to second reading, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion passes. Jim, hell of a suggestion.
Session to discuss personnel matter.
Okay,
Second.
all right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Let's move to where are we going? Over there?
No.
Over there? No.